The whispers followed Marcus Reed across the crowded charity gala like unwelcome ghosts. His phone buzzed for the
I'll have
third
another
time
one
in
of these.
5 minutes.
Right away, sir.
Mrs. Kowalski, his neighbor,
Thanks.
the 68-year-old lifeline who made single fatherhood possible. Sophie had spiked a fever, 102 degrees. The message glowed accusingly on his screen, while crystal chandeliers scattered light across Manhattan's elite, their champagne glasses catching reflections he could never afford to join. He stood at the bar, nursing club soda, when he saw her. Vanessa Hartley Blackwood draped herself in crimson silk that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her laugh carried across the ballroom, practiced, performative, designed to draw attention. Robert Blackwood's hand rested possessively on her waist, diamonds glittering at her throat like tiny accusatory eyes. The same woman who'd told him 3 years ago that he'd never amount to anything while juggling fatherhood. The same woman who'd chosen ambition over their daughter without a backward glance. Marcus turned away, fingers tightening around his glass. He'd saved for 3 months to buy the suit he wore tonight. Brooks Brothers, off the rack, but it fit well enough that nobody would know the difference. Except he knew. He always knew. His phone buzzed again. The confrontation began before he could retreat. "Well, if it isn't Marcus Reed." Vanessa's voice sliced through the ambient noise, servers weaving between guests, violins sighing through some classical piece he couldn't name. She approached with Robert in tow, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "I'm surprised to see you here. Shouldn't you be home reading bedtime stories?" Robert extended his hand, the gesture more dismissive than welcoming. They'd met exactly once during the divorce proceedings, when lawyers had parsed their marriage into assets and liabilities, when Vanessa had signed away custody rights like she was decluttering a closet. "Still in marketing?" The condescension dripped like honey. Marcus pocketed his phone, keeping his expression neutral despite the rage building in his chest. "Vanessa, Robert. Good to see you both." The lie tasted bitter. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, tracking something in his face. Worry, probably, or the exhaustion that came from working 60-hour weeks while raising a 5-year-old alone. She leaned closer, her perfume cloying and expensive. "You look distracted. Don't tell me. Babysitter problems?" "This is exactly why serious careers and single parenthood don't mix, Marcus." He forced his shoulders to relax, willing his voice to remain steady. "Sophie's fine. I'm just working the room." Robert chuckled, the sound wet and self-satisfied. "Working the room? I wasn't aware Ashford Technologies sent anyone of consequence tonight. Victoria usually skips these events. Too busy revolutionizing the tech world, I suppose." The dismissal landed exactly where Robert intended. Marcus had spent 18 months proving himself worthy of the marketing director title. 18 months learning to think 3 steps ahead, to see connections nobody else noticed. Victoria Ashford had personally mentored him, had trusted him with campaigns that generated millions. But standing here in his off-the-rack suit while Robert wore custom Italian wool, Marcus felt every dollar of the gap between them. Vanessa wasn't finished. "We saw your apartment last month when we dropped Sophie off. Still in that same building in Queens. I worry about her growing up in such a limited environment." The words hit like physical blows. Marcus had scrubbed that apartment until his hands ached, had painted Sophie's room himself in her favorite lavender, had built her bookshelves from scratch using skills his grandfather taught him back when he was an electrician's apprentice. Limited, as if love could be measured in square footage. His jaw clenched. "My daughter is happy, well-adjusted, and loved. That's all that matters." Vanessa sighed dramatically, playing to an audience that was beginning to notice their exchange. Heads turned, Conversations paused. Manhattan society loved nothing more than witnessing someone's public dismantling. Of course, that's what you'd say. I just think children need stability, opportunities, and with your situation... The voice behind him sent electricity down his spine. His situation seems perfectly admirable to me. Marcus froze. He knew that voice. Cool, precise, capable of dismantling billion-dollar companies or building empires with equal efficiency. Victoria Ashford stood there in midnight blue, her dark hair swept into an elegant twist, her eyes sharp enough to cut through steel. She never attended these events. She'd told him explicitly she considered charity galas a waste of time, performative philanthropy for people who wanted credit without sacrifice. Yet here she stood. Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Miss Ashford, what a pleasure. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Vanessa Blackwood, and this is my husband, Robert. Victoria's gaze swept over them both with the clinical precision of someone evaluating a failed investment. Then she turned to Marcus, and her expression transformed. Warmth flooding features that usually remained carefully neutral. She slipped her arm through his, the gesture intimate and possessive, before leaning in to press a kiss against his cheek. The ballroom fell silent. 200 guests collectively holding their breath. There you are, Marcus. I've been looking everywhere for my right-hand man. Her voice carried just far enough, intentional, calculated. Victoria Ashford never did anything without purpose. Marcus stood paralyzed, feeling the softness of her lips against his skin, the jasmine scent of her perfume, the way her fingers tightened around his arm. His heart hammered against his ribs. She continued, addressing Vanessa while keeping her body angled toward Marcus. I see you've run into your ex-wife. How unfortunate. I was hoping we could discuss the Brooklyn Schools Initiative. Governor Williams was extremely impressed with your presentation last week. He's eager to implement it statewide. The words filtered through Marcus's shock. He had developed a technology partnership program for underfunded public schools, had spent months researching, designing curriculum, securing equipment donations. The governor's interest was news, but he followed Victoria's lead, understanding instinctively that she was orchestrating something larger. That's wonderful news. The pilot program showed promising results. Victoria beamed at him with what appeared to be genuine pride. Marcus has revolutionized our community engagement approach. His ability to balance innovative thinking with practical implementation is unmatched, all while being an exceptional father. She squeezed his arm, the possessive pronoun hanging in the air like a declaration of ownership. Which reminds me, how is Sophie? Still enjoying those advanced science kits I sent over? The question wasn't really a question. It was a statement of involvement, of family intimacy, designed to land like a grenade in Vanessa's perfectly curated world. Marcus found his voice. She loves them. She's determined to build a robot next. Victoria's smile widened. That's my girl. The words detonated in the space between them. My girl. Not your daughter. Not the child you abandoned. My girl. Vanessa's face flushed crimson, the color spreading down her neck. Robert attempted damage control, stepping forward with his practiced politician's smile. Miss Ashford, I've long admired your work. Perhaps we could discuss potential collaborations between my firm and Ashford Technologies. Victoria's expression could have frozen water. I'm afraid we're quite selective about our partnerships, Mr. Blackwood. Our values need to align. She checked her watch. Patek Philippe, understated, but worth more than Marcus's car, before turning back to him. Marcus, we should make our way to our table. The program will be starting soon. As she guided him away, Marcus heard Vanessa hiss at her husband. "Did you know he was working directly with her? Why didn't you tell me?" They navigated through clusters of guests, Victoria's hand still resting in the crook of his elbow. Once they'd moved beyond earshot, Marcus finally processed what had happened. "Thank you for that rescue, but you didn't have to." "I wasn't rescuing you. I was stating facts." Her tone shifted, losing its public performance edge. Something raw flickered across her features. "Your ex-wife is a fool who couldn't recognize what she had." The intensity in her eyes made his pulse quicken. He struggled to find solid ground in this conversation, in the reality of Victoria Ashford defending him at a charity gala she supposedly never attended. "My daughter has a fever. Mrs. Kowalski texted me. That's why I looked worried." Concern flooded Victoria's face immediately. "Is Sophie okay? How high?" He pulled up the messages. 102. She gave her children's Tylenol. Victoria didn't hesitate. "Go home to your daughter, Marcus. That's more important than this circus." "But the gala." "I'll make your excuses. Go." Something shifted in the air between them, a question forming that he didn't quite know how to ask. "Why did you come tonight? You always skip these events." Vulnerability flickered across her face, there and gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "Perhaps I wanted to see you in a tuxedo." Before he could respond, she continued, her voice dropping lower. "Or perhaps I knew your ex-wife would be here and thought you might need an ally." The idea seemed impossible. Victoria Ashford ran a company valued at $200 million, managed a schedule packed with board meetings and product launches and investor calls. The notion that she would attend an event she despised just to support him defied logic. "How did you know Vanessa would be here?" "I reviewed the guest list. Robert sits on the hospital board. Logic suggested his wife would attend." Marcus stared at her, trying to reconcile this information with everything he thought he understood about their relationship. She'd planned this. She'd come here deliberately, knowing he might face his ex-wife, prepared to intervene. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate. Victoria nodded, already shifting back into CEO mode. "Give Sophie a hug from me. Tell her I'll bring over my grandmother's chicken soup recipe tomorrow. It always helped me when I was sick as a child." He left the Grand Hotel in a daze, his head spinning with the evening's revelations. Victoria's lips on his cheek, the declaration of "my girl." The calculated performance that had left Vanessa speechless and Robert fumbling for footing. By the time he reached his apartment in Queens, Sophie's fever had broken, but she remained fretful and miserable. Marcus spent the night reading her stories, pressing cool washcloths to her forehead, measuring out doses of medicine with the precision he'd learned from 18 months of solo parenting. Around 3 in the morning, she finally drifted into restful sleep, her small hand clutching his fingers. He sat beside her bed, watching her breathe, and felt the weight of Vanessa's words pressing down on him. Limited environment. As if the love he poured into this child, the sacrifices he made daily, the careful budgeting that ensured she never went without necessities, as if none of that mattered because he couldn't afford a house in the suburbs with a pool and a home theater. The next afternoon, his doorbell rang. Victoria Ashford stood in his hallway holding grocery bags, wearing jeans and a cream-colored sweater instead of her usual tailored suits. He'd never seen her dressed casually. She looked younger, softer, almost uncertain. "I brought soup and fresh bread and juice." She walked past him into the apartment like this was perfectly normal, like billionaire CEOs regularly showed up at employees' homes on Sunday afternoons carrying comfort food. Sophie was awake, propped against pillows in her bed, coloring in one of the science workbooks Victoria had sent last month. Her face lit up when she saw her visitor. "Miss Tori, you came!" Victoria settled onto the edge of the bed, asking about symptoms and medicine with the attentiveness of someone who genuinely cared. She told stories about her own grandmother, about being sick as a child, and how the smell of chicken soup always meant safety and healing. Sophie listened, enraptured, until her eyelids began drooping again. Marcus and Victoria moved to the living room. He made coffee, the good beans he saved for special occasions, and they sat in silence that felt charged with unspoken questions. Finally, he asked what he'd been wondering since last night. "Why do you care this much? About me, about Sophie?" Victoria stared into her mug, her fingers wrapped around the ceramic like she needed its warmth. "Because you remind me of what I lost." He waited, sensing this was a door that had been sealed shut for years. 10 years ago, I was pregnant. I was engaged. The words dropped like stones into still water. I miscarried at 20 weeks. The doctors at Mount Sinai said it was stress, working too many hours, not taking care of myself properly. Her hands trembled slightly. My fiancé blamed me. He said I'd chosen my company over our family, that I'd killed our baby through my ambition. He called off the engagement 3 days after I got out of the hospital. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks, the first time Marcus had ever seen Victoria Ashford cry. I threw myself into building the business, turned pain into patents, grief into quarterly earnings. The doctor said another pregnancy would be high risk. I chose my career. She looked up, meeting his eyes. I built an empire. But some nights, I'd trade everything I've accomplished to hear a child call me mom. The confession hung between them, raw and devastating. Marcus wanted to reach for her hand, to offer comfort, but the weight of their professional relationship held him back. Victoria wiped her eyes, attempting a smile that didn't quite land. When Sophie shows me her experiments, when she looks at me like I hung the moon, that's the first time in 10 years I felt like I could have a family. Like maybe it's not too late. The moment stretched, heavy with possibility. Marcus leaned forward. Victoria mirrored the movement. Their faces drew closer, breath mingling, the space between them charged with everything they'd left unsaid over 18 months of careful professional boundaries. His phone shattered the moment. Vanessa's name glowed on the screen. Marcus hesitated, then answered, some instinct warning him this wasn't a social call. Her voice dripped false sweetness. "Marcus, I'd like to see Sophie this week. Can I pick her up Wednesday?" Confusion threaded through his response. Vanessa exercised her visitation rights sporadically, 7 times in 3 years, never scheduled, always last minute when it suited her calendar. She just got over a fever. The sweetness evaporated. "I'm her mother, Marcus. Or do I need to remind you of that legally?" The line went dead. He stared at the phone, ice flooding his veins. Victoria saw his expression shift. "What's wrong?" "I don't know, but something's coming." The following Monday brought unseasonable warmth to New York. Marcus left work early to take Sophie to Central Park, making up for the weekend she'd spent sick in bed. They fed ducks, climbed rocks, played elaborate games involving princesses and dragons. She laughed, color returning to her cheeks, and he felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. The process server appeared as they packed up their things. "Marcus Reed?" He handed over an envelope. "Manhattan Family Court," embossed in official lettering. Marcus's hands shook as he tore it open, Sophie tugging at his sleeve, asking what was wrong. Why did Daddy look scared? Petition for modification of custody. The words blurred together. Mother seeks primary custody. Father's work schedule unstable. Child exposed to inappropriate workplace environment. Mother now in stable marriage can provide superior opportunities. His vision tunneled. 3 years of bedtime stories and science experiments, of braiding hair and packing lunches, of staying up late helping with homework and waking early to ensure she never felt the absence of a mother who'd chosen designer handbags over diaper bags. 3 years of proving Vanessa wrong, of building a life where Sophie thrived despite their modest means. And now, she wanted to take it all away. Sophie's voice pulled him back. "Daddy, you're crying." He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair, fighting to control the panic rising in his throat. "It's okay, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay." The lie felt like ash on his tongue. He called Victoria from the park bench, unable to wait, unable to process this alone. His voice broke on the second word. "They're trying to take her." 30 minutes later, Victoria arrived. She'd been at dinner with investors in Midtown, but she'd left immediately. She sat beside him while Sophie played on the swings, oblivious to the legal bomb that had just detonated in their lives. Victoria read the petition with the focused intensity she brought to hostile takeovers and patent disputes. When she finished, her jaw was set in a way that usually preceded someone getting professionally destroyed. "We're going to fight this. Together." Marcus shook his head, trying to find solid ground. "Tori, this isn't your battle." She grabbed his hands, her grip fierce. "Yes, it is." "Because She stopped, recalibrating. "Because you're important to me. Both of you." The admission landed between them, undeniable and terrifying. Marcus pulled his hands away, standing, pacing. "They have money. Lawyers who cost more per hour than I make in a week. A stable 2-parent household in the suburbs. What do I have? A 2-bedroom apartment and a job that sometimes keeps me at the office past midnight." Victoria stood, catching his arm, forcing him to face her. "You have dedication. 18 months of perfect parenting. School records showing Sophie's thriving. A daughter who adores you. That's not enough. You know it's not enough." Her eyes flashed, the steel returning. "I have more money than Robert Blackwood will ever see. Better lawyers than anyone he can afford. And I have the truth." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost dangerous. "Vanessa wants a war? Let's give her one she'll never forget." The promise hung in the air like a declaration of intent. Marcus searched her face, trying to understand what she was offering, what this alliance might cost them both. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Victoria's expression softened, vulnerability breaking through her armor. "Because when I see you with Sophie, I see what I could have had. What I still might have if I'm brave enough to reach for it." She paused, then continued, each word carefully chosen. "Because watching you build a family alone, while I built a company alone, made me realize we're both fighting the wrong battles." The confession stripped away pretense. They stood in Central Park as evening settled over Manhattan, the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. And Marcus understood that whatever happened next would change everything between them. He thought about his grandfather, dead 5 years now, who taught him that a man's worth wasn't measured in dollars, but in what he built with his own hands. Who'd shown him how to wire circuits and fix broken things, who'd said that understanding how pieces fit together was the key to understanding life itself. Victoria had built an empire from a single patent. Marcus had built a daughter's happiness from the ruins of a failed marriage. Maybe together they could build something neither of them could create alone. "Okay." The word felt like stepping off a cliff. Okay? We fight. Together. Victoria's smile broke across her face like sunrise, fierce and beautiful. She pulled out her phone, already making calls. Catherine Walsh, the best family law attorney in New York. Emergency meetings, document gathering, strategy sessions. Sophie ran over, flushed from the swings, grabbing Marcus's hand. Can Miss Tori stay for dinner? Please, Daddy? He looked at Victoria, who was still on the phone, already 3 steps ahead, planning their counterattack with the same ruthless efficiency she brought to billion-dollar deals. She caught his eye and nodded. Yes, sweetheart. Miss Tori staying for dinner. They walked back to Queens together. The CEO, the single father, and the child had become the center of a battle neither adult had chosen, but both would fight until the end. Marcus carried Sophie on his shoulders, while Victoria walked beside them, and for the first time since the process server had handed him that envelope, he felt something other than fear. He felt hope. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Victoria and Marcus sat at his small kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents and coffee cups. She'd already assembled a war room in her head, witnesses they'd need, evidence to gather, character references to compile. She worked with the focused intensity that had built her fortune, except now that intensity was aimed at protecting his daughter. Their daughter, some part of his mind whispered. The girl who called her Miss Tori and begged to show her science experiments and lit up when she walked into a room. We need to document everything, Victoria said, making notes on her tablet. Every interaction you've had with Sophie, school records, medical records, after-school activities. We need to prove you're not just adequate, you're exceptional. Marcus watched her work. This woman who'd entered his life 18 months ago and systematically dismantled every wall he'd built around his heart. She'd done it so quietly he hadn't noticed until now, until crisis forced him to see what had been growing between them all along. Thank you. She looked up, her expression softening. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly. Vanessa's going to attack everything. Your job, your living situation, even your relationship with me. Our relationship? The question hung in the air. Victoria set down her tablet. Marcus, I kissed you in front of 200 people last night. By tomorrow morning, every gossip column in Manhattan will be speculating about us. Vanessa's lawyers are going to use that. They're going to paint me as the other woman, as inappropriate influence on Sophie, as proof you're prioritizing romance over parenting. She reached across the table, taking his hand. I need you to understand what you're signing up for. This isn't just a custody battle. It's going to be a media circus. My board is already concerned about the optics. Some of them think I should distance myself. Let you handle this alone. What do you think? Victoria's fingers tightened around his. I think I spent 10 years building a company because I was too afraid to build a family. I think I watched you love your daughter with everything you have and realized what I'd been missing. I think I'm done running from the things that matter. The words settled between them like a promise. Marcus turned his hand over, interlacing their fingers. I'm scared. Me too. Not just of losing Sophie. Of this. Of us. Of what happens if we're wrong. Victoria stood, moving around the table to kneel beside his chair. She cupped his face in her hands, her dark eyes fierce. We're not wrong. And we're not going to lose. She kissed him then, soft and sure, and Marcus tasted salt. His tears or hers, he couldn't tell. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. Your ex-wife made a mistake walking away from you. I won't make the same one. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing together, gathering strength for the battle ahead. Through the thin walls, Marcus could hear Sophie's gentle snoring, the sound of his entire world sleeping peacefully while storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Tomorrow, they'd start building their case. They'd gather evidence and rally witnesses and prepare for war. But tonight, sitting in his small kitchen with this brilliant, complicated woman who'd somehow become essential to his survival, Marcus let himself believe they might actually win. Because he'd learned something during 3 years of single fatherhood that Vanessa had never understood. Love wasn't about money or houses or the right zip code. It was about showing up every single day, about choosing someone over and over, about building a life from spare parts and determination and the absolute refusal to give up. He'd built Sophie's happiness from nothing. He'd build their future the same way. One day, one choice, one small victory at a time. And this time, he wouldn't be building alone. Catherine Walsh's corner office overlooked Lower Manhattan from 40 stories up, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city like a promise or a threat. She was 53, with silver hair cut sharp as her reputation and eyes that had seen every variation of family law warfare. Her handshake crushed Marcus's fingers with surprising strength. "Mr. Reed, Miss Ashford has briefed me on your situation. I won't sugarcoat this. Vanessa's petition hits every emotional trigger judges respond to. Stable marriage, financial security, the reformed mother narrative. We're fighting uphill." Victoria settled into the leather chair beside Marcus, her presence grounding him. "What's our strategy?" Catherine spread documents across her mahogany desk: the custody petition, Marcus's divorce decree, Sophie's school records from the past 3 years. "We document everything. Every parent-teacher conference Marcus attended, every soccer practice, every doctor's appointment, every bedtime story. We prove he's not just adequate, he's irreplaceable." She tapped one manicured nail against a highlighted section of Vanessa's petition. "They're claiming your work schedule is unstable, that Sophie spends inappropriate time at Ashford Technologies. We counter by demonstrating the flexible arrangement you've created, the supervised environment, the educational value. Ms. Ashford, I'll need you to testify about the workplace setup." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Whatever you need." Catherine's gaze shifted between them, assessing. "I should mention, your relationship is going to be central to their case. They'll argue Ms. Ashford wields inappropriate influence, that Marcus prioritizes romance over parenting, that Sophie's being used as a pawn in a billionaire's personal drama." Marcus's stomach dropped. "That's not—" "I know, but perception matters in family court. Judge Patricia Morrison is fair but traditional. She values stability, conventional family structures. A single father dating his female boss, who happens to be a billionaire, complicates our narrative." Victoria leaned forward. "So what do you suggest? That we pretend we don't care about each other? Lie to the court?" "I suggest we control the narrative. Frame this as a natural evolution, 2 professionals who developed genuine feelings while working together, who both prioritize Sophie's welfare above everything else. But we need to be strategic about optics." She pulled out another file. "The court's appointed Dr. Ramon Santos as Sophie's child psychologist. He'll interview her privately next week. Everything she says gets included in his report to the judge. We need to prepare her without coaching her. There's a fine line." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "She's 5 years old." How do I explain that her mother's trying to take her away without terrifying her? You tell her the truth in age-appropriate terms. Mommy wants to spend more time with her. The judge needs to talk to some people to figure out what's best. You emphasize that Daddy loves her, that nothing's going to change right now, that grown-ups are working to figure things out. The weight of it crushed down on Marcus's chest. 3 years of protecting Sophie from the ugliness of adult decisions, and now he had to explain that her mother, who barely remembered her existence, suddenly wanted custody because a billionaire had kissed her father at a charity gala. Catherine wasn't finished. Vanessa's already started her media campaign. Instagram posts about fighting for her daughter, interviews with local news about second chances and maternal redemption. She's positioning herself as the penitent mother who's ready to step up. She slid her tablet across the desk. Vanessa's Instagram feed glowed with carefully curated images. Mother and daughter at Frau Schwartz, both smiling for the camera. Sophie looked uncomfortable in the fancy dress Vanessa had insisted she wear. The caption read, "Reunited with my baby girl. A mother's love never dies. Hashtag fighting for my daughter. Hashtag second chances." The comment section overflowed with support. "You go, Mama. Every child deserves their mother. So brave to share your journey." Marcus wanted to put his fist through the screen. Those photos are from court-ordered visitation last month. She spent 45 minutes with Sophie, bought her an expensive toy, then dropped her back at my apartment and left for a spa weekend in Connecticut. I know, and we'll demonstrate that pattern. But public opinion matters, especially if this case generates media attention, which, given Ms. Ashford's involvement, it absolutely will. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression darkening. "My board's requesting an emergency meeting. They're concerned about the publicity." Catherine nodded, unsurprised. "Expect pressure to distance yourself. Ashford Technologies stock will react to this story." Investors don't like uncertainty, especially uncertainty involving their CEO's personal life. Let them be concerned. I'm not backing down. The steel in Victoria's voice made something in Marcus's chest both tighten and expand. She was risking everything, her company, her reputation, her carefully constructed public image, for him and Sophie. The magnitude of that sacrifice threatened to overwhelm him. They spent another hour reviewing strategy, timelines, potential witnesses. Catherine would subpoena Vanessa's visitation records, document her minimal involvement, demonstrate the pattern of abandonment. They'd call Sophie's teachers, her pediatrician, Mrs. Kowalski. They'd build a fortress of evidence proving Marcus wasn't just a good father, he was the only real parent Sophie had ever known. Walking out of Catherine's office, Marcus felt both energized and terrified. Victoria's hand found his in the elevator, squeezing gently. "We're going to win this." He wanted to believe her, but the image of Sophie in that uncomfortable dress, smiling for Vanessa's Instagram performance, haunted him all the way back to Queens. Dr. Ramon Santos had kind eyes and a gentle voice that probably put children at ease. Marcus sat in the waiting room of the child psychology office in Brooklyn while Sophie went in alone, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. Victoria had wanted to come, but Catherine had advised against it. Too much pressure, too obvious an attempt to influence the outcome. 45 minutes felt like decades. When Sophie emerged, she looked neither traumatized nor particularly affected. Dr. Santos shook Marcus's hand, his expression professionally neutral. "Sophie's a delightful child, very bright, very articulate. My report will be ready for the court next week." He offered nothing else. Marcus wanted to grab him by his cardigan and demand answers. Did she say she wanted to live with him? Did she mention Vanessa's absence? Did she talk about Victoria? Instead, he thanked the doctor and took Sophie's hand, leading her to the car. "How was it, sweetheart?" Sophie shrugged, already moving on to more important matters. "He asked me lots of questions. Can we get pizza for dinner? Miss Tori said she might come over tonight if you said it was okay." The casual mention of Victoria, the assumption that she was part of their routine, their family, both warmed and worried him. If Sophie testified that she wanted Victoria in her life, would that help their case or hurt it? He pushed the thoughts away. Pizza sounds perfect, and yes, Miss Tori's coming over. That night, Victoria arrived with a bottle of wine for the adults and a new robotics kit for Sophie. They ate pizza on the living room floor, while Sophie explained her ambitious plans to build a robot that could fetch things and maybe also dance. Victoria engaged with complete seriousness, asking about motors and power sources and programming languages, treating a 5-year-old's fantasy project like a legitimate engineering challenge. Marcus watched them together, Victoria's dark hair falling forward as she leaned over the instruction manual, Sophie's small hands pointing out pieces, their heads close together in concentration, and felt his heart crack open with terrifying vulnerability. This was what he wanted. Not just for Sophie to have a mother figure, but for himself to have a partner who understood that building Lego robots on a Tuesday night mattered more than any boardroom victory. After Sophie went to bed, exhausted from construction efforts, Marcus and Victoria retreated to the kitchen. She poured wine while he loaded the dishwasher, a domestic rhythm that felt both new and ancient. "Catherine called while you were reading bedtime stories." Vanessa's lawyer depositioned 3 of her friends as character witnesses. They're all prepared to testify she's changed, that she regrets her choices, that she's ready to be the mother Sophie deserves. Marcus's hands stilled on a plate. "And we counter with what? 3 years of her not giving a damn?" "Exactly that. Catherine's pulling phone records, text messages, every documented interaction. We demonstrate the pattern." He turned, leaning against the counter. "What if that's not enough? What if the judge decides Sophie needs her mother, that a 2-parent household in the suburbs with a pool and a home theater is better than this?" He gestured around the small kitchen, the worn cabinets he'd repainted himself, the linoleum floor that had seen better decades. Victoria set down her wine glass and crossed to him, her hands finding his waist. "This apartment is filled with more love than Vanessa's mansion will ever hold. Sophie knows that. The judge will see it." "You don't know that." "I know you. I know what you've built here. I know that Sophie feels safer in this 2-bedroom apartment than she ever could in a house where her mother sees her as a prop for social media." She rose on her toes, kissing him softly. "Have faith in what you've created. I do." The tenderness in her voice undid him. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair, breathing in jasmine and determination. "I'm scared of losing her." "I know. Me too." The admission surprised him. He pulled back, searching her face. "You're scared?" Victoria's eyes glistened. "I lost 1 child already. I can't lose Sophie too." The words hung between them, raw and devastating. This wasn't just Marcus's battle anymore. Victoria had claimed Sophie in her heart, had imagined a future where the 3 of them were family, and now that future was under attack. They stood in his small kitchen, holding each other against the storm they could feel gathering, and Marcus understood that whatever happened in that courtroom would determine all their fates. The next day brought worse news. Amanda rushed into Marcus's office, her face pale. "Robert Blackwood's company just launched a hostile bid for our primary supplier. If it succeeds, we lose 30% of our supply chain." Marcus's blood went cold. "When?" "This morning. The board's in emergency session with Victoria now." He abandoned his marketing reports and headed for the executive floor. Through the glass walls of the conference room, he could see Victoria standing at the head of the table, surrounded by board members whose body language radiated hostility. Her CFO was gesticulating, clearly arguing something Victoria didn't want to hear. Marcus stopped outside, unwilling to interrupt, but unable to walk away. Amanda appeared beside him. They're pressuring her to distance herself from you. They think Robert's retaliating for the gala, that this is personal warfare dressed as business strategy. They're right. Amanda's expression softened. For what it's worth, I've never seen her like this. Victoria's always been brilliant, but cold. All business, no personal life. You and Sophie changed something in her. She's willing to risk everything for you. That's what I'm afraid of. The conference room door opened. Board members filed out, their faces grim. Victoria stood alone at the window, her shoulders tight with tension. Marcus entered quietly. How bad? She didn't turn around. Bad. If Robert takes control of the supplier, he can manipulate pricing, delay shipments, sabotage our production schedule. We'd be looking at significant losses, possibly delayed product launches. The board wants me to settle, publicly announce we're just professional colleagues, nothing more. Remove the personal element so Robert backs off. Maybe you should. Now she turned, her eyes flashing. Absolutely not. Tori, I can't let you destroy your company because of me. This isn't just about you. It's about refusing to be blackmailed by a man who thinks money and threats are substitutes for actual power. She crossed to him, fierce and beautiful in her tailored suit. Robert wants to hurt me by hurting you. If I back down now, I'm admitting that personal relationships are weaknesses to be exploited, that love is a liability. I won't live like that anymore. Marcus cupped her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Even if it costs you everything you've built? I built Ashford Technologies to prove I was worthy of my ex-fiancé's love, worthy of my parents' respect, worthy of existing in a world that told me women couldn't be both brilliant and fulfilled. But I was proving it to the wrong people. Her voice dropped to something achingly vulnerable. Watching you with Sophie taught me what actually matters. You don't measure your worth in patents or quarterly earnings. You measure it in bedtime stories and science experiments, and whether your daughter feels loved. That's the only metric that counts. She kissed him, pouring defiance and tenderness into the gesture. So no, I'm not backing down. Let Robert play his games. I'll find new suppliers, restructure our production, do whatever it takes. But I won't pretend you don't matter to me. Marcus held her, understanding that this woman who'd built an empire from nothing was now willing to risk it all for something she valued more. The responsibility of that trust terrified him. 3 days later, the trial preparation hit a new obstacle. Catherine called with updates Marcus didn't want to hear. Vanessa's lawyer filed a motion requesting DNA testing. They're claiming there's uncertainty about Sophie's paternity. The words didn't make sense. What? I'm her father. We did a test 3 years ago when Vanessa first suggested. They're claiming that test was potentially compromised, that you had motive to falsify results to maintain custody. It's a stalling tactic, but it's effective. If the judge grants the motion, it adds another month to our timeline. Rage flooded through Marcus's veins. This is insane. Sophie is my daughter. Biologically, legally, in every way that matters. I know. We'll fight the motion. But Marcus, I need to ask. Was there ever any legitimate question about paternity? He sank into his desk chair, the memories surfacing like poison. Before we got married, Vanessa had an affair. Brief, meaningless, or so she said. She was pregnant when we got engaged, didn't know who the father was. We did a paternity test after Sophie was born. I'm her biological father. The lab results were definitive. Do you still have those results? Somewhere in my files. But Catherine, this is ridiculous. Vanessa knows I'm Sophie's father. She's just throwing accusations to make me look unstable. That's exactly what she's doing. And it might work. Judge Morrison values genetic connection. If there's even a whisper of doubt, there's no doubt. But even as he said it, Marcus felt the old insecurity creeping back. The reminder that Vanessa had been sleeping with someone else when Sophie was conceived, that there had been uncertainty, that their entire marriage was built on lies and desperation and trying to do the right thing for a child who might not have been his. Except she was his. From the moment the nurse placed that squirming, red-faced newborn in his arms, Sophie had been his daughter in every way that mattered. Biology was just confirmation of what his heart already knew. He found the lab results that night, buried in a box of divorce papers he'd shoved into the back of his closet. The document was clear. 99.9% probability of paternity. Definitive. Irrefutable. Victoria found him sitting on the bedroom floor, surrounded by papers, the test results clutched in his hand. Marcus? He looked up, and she saw something in his face that made her sink down beside him. Vanessa's claiming Sophie might not be mine. She wants new DNA testing. Victoria took the document, scanning the results. This is definitive. No judge will order redundant testing based on baseless speculation. You don't know that. His voice sounded hollow, even to his own ears. Victoria set the paper aside and took his hands. Listen to me. Sophie is yours. Not because of some chromosome match, but because you chose her every single day for 5 years. You chose her when Vanessa walked away. You chose her through sleepless nights and sick days and tantrums in grocery stores. You chose her when it would have been easier to let someone else take over. What if the judge doesn't see it that way? Then the judge is wrong, and we appeal. And we keep fighting until someone with sense makes the right decision. Her certainty anchored him. He leaned his forehead against hers, drawing strength from her unwavering faith. I don't deserve you. Yes, you do. You deserve everything good in this world, Marcus Reed, and I'm going to make sure you get it. The preliminary hearing arrived like an execution date. Manhattan Family Court smelled of floor polish and desperation, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead while families waited in hard plastic chairs for their turn to have their lives dissected by strangers. Marcus wore his best suit, still off the rack but pressed and professional. Victoria sat beside him in elegant gray, her presence drawing stares from other families and court staff. Catherine had arrived early to review last-minute strategy, her leather briefcase stuffed with evidence. Vanessa entered with her legal team. Richard Stokes, a prominent family attorney known for aggressive tactics and winning custody cases nobody thought he could win. She'd dressed conservatively, navy blue dress and minimal jewelry, her hair pulled back in a style that suggested maternal wholesomeness rather than her usual high society glamour. The performance was masterful. Judge Patricia Morrison took the bench precisely at 9 o'clock. She was 55, with gray hair and reading glasses, her expression suggesting she'd seen every variation of family drama and found all of it exhausting. We're here for a preliminary hearing in the matter of Hartley Blackwood versus Reed, petition for modification of custody. Let's keep this efficient, counselors. I've read your filings. Mr. Stokes, you may begin. Richard Stokes stood, his silver hair and expensive suit projecting authority. Your Honor, my client comes before this court with humility and remorse. 3 years ago, Mrs. Blackwood made a mistake. She voluntarily relinquished custody of her daughter Sophie, believing she wasn't ready for motherhood. She spent the intervening years working on herself, addressing her issues, building a stable marriage and home environment. She now seeks to rectify that mistake and provide Sophie with the two-parent household every child deserves. He gestured toward Vanessa, who looked appropriately penitent. Mrs. Blackwood has regular employment, a supportive spouse, a home with dedicated space for Sophie, and the financial resources to provide opportunities Mr. Reed simply cannot match. She's not asking to remove Mr. Reed from Sophie's life, only to share custody more equitably, to give her daughter the benefit of both parents. Catherine rose, her voice crisp. Your Honor, Mr. Reed has been Sophie's sole caregiver for 3 years. Mrs. Blackwood visited her daughter 7 times, total of 31 hours, in that entire period. This sudden maternal interest coincides suspiciously with Mr. Reed's professional success and personal relationship with Miss Ashford. This isn't about Sophie's welfare. It's about ego and retaliation. Judge Morrison held up one hand. I'll determine motivation, Ms. Walsh. For today, I'm ordering a comprehensive home study for both residences, continued psychological evaluation of the child, and temporary maintenance of current custody arrangements pending full trial. We'll reconvene in 6 weeks for evidentiary hearings. She looked directly at Marcus and Vanessa. I want to be clear. This court's only concern is Sophie's best interest. Not your feelings, not your finances, not your personal grievances. That child deserves parents who put her first. I suggest you both remember that. The gavel fell. Walking out of the courthouse, Marcus felt simultaneously relieved and devastated. 6 more weeks of uncertainty. 6 more weeks of Sophie asking why Mommy was suddenly so interested. 6 more weeks of Vanessa's Instagram campaign painting her as a devoted mother fighting against an uncaring system. Victoria's phone rang before they reached the car. She answered, her expression darkening as she listened. I understand. Schedule it for tomorrow morning. She ended the call, her jaw tight. Anonymous tip to the press. Someone leaked our relationship, claiming I'm using company resources to fight your custody battle, that I'm prioritizing personal drama over shareholder interests. The tabloids are running with it. Marcus's stomach dropped. How bad? She showed him her phone. The headline blazed across page 6. Tech Queen's boy toy in custody scandal. Billionaire CEO Victoria Ashford accused of mixing business with pleasure. The article featured photos from the charity gala, Victoria kissing his cheek, her arm through his, their bodies close. It speculated about their relationship, questioned her judgment, suggested she was having a midlife crisis that threatened Ashford Technologies' stability. I'm sorry. Victoria pocketed her phone, her expression fierce. Don't apologize. They can write whatever they want. We know the truth. But the damage was done. By evening, the story had spread to major news outlets. Financial analysts questioned Victoria's focus, suggested the custody battle was distracting from her duties, speculated about the company's future under a CEO who'd allegedly lost objectivity. Ashford Technologies stock dropped 3%. That night, Victoria's board demanded her presence at an emergency meeting. Marcus waited at her penthouse apartment in Tribeca, a space he'd been to exactly twice before, all glass and modern art and views that stretched across the Hudson River. It felt like a museum, beautiful but cold. Nothing like the warmth of his small apartment in Queens, where Sophie's drawings covered the refrigerator and science experiments cluttered the kitchen table. Victoria returned after midnight, her face drawn with exhaustion. They gave me an ultimatum. Publicly announce we're just professional colleagues, stop attending court proceedings, distance myself from your case, or face a vote of no confidence. Marcus stood, his world tilting. "What did you say?" Victoria dropped her bag, crossing to the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I told them to schedule their vote. I'm not backing down." "Tori, I built this company from nothing, Marcus. One patent, one investor meeting, one impossible deadline at a time. I made them all rich beyond their wildest dreams. And now they want me to choose between my company and my family because they're afraid of bad press?" She turned, tears streaming down her face. "I choose family. I choose you and Sophie. I choose the life I want instead of the one everyone else thinks I should have." Marcus crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "You might lose everything." "I already lost everything once, when my baby died and my fiancé blamed me for choosing wrong. I won't make that mistake again. If they force me out, I'll start over, but I won't abandon you." The conviction in her voice both humbled and terrified him. He'd never asked her to sacrifice her empire, never wanted her to choose between her company and their relationship. But she was choosing anyway, with full knowledge of the cost. They stood together in her sterile penthouse, holding each other while the city glittered below, and Marcus understood that some battles couldn't be won without losing something precious along the way. The next morning brought another explosion. Amanda called Marcus's cell at 7, her voice shaking. "Turn on Channel 4, now." He fumbled for the remote, Victoria still asleep beside him. The morning news filled the screen. Vanessa, sitting in a television studio, dabbing artfully at her eyes while a sympathetic host nodded along. "I made mistakes," Vanessa was saying, her voice breaking at precisely the right moments. "I was young, overwhelmed, suffering from undiagnosed postpartum depression. I thought Sophie was better off without me. But I've gotten help. I've worked through my issues, and now all I want is a chance to be the mother my daughter deserves." The host leaned forward, concerned and engaged. "And Mr. Reed, Sophie's father?" Vanessa's expression shifted to something approximating sadness. "Marcus is a good man, but he's so focused on proving something, to me, to himself, to his new girlfriend, that he can't see how Sophie's being caught in the middle. She's exposed to adult relationships she's too young to understand, spending time in corporate offices instead of playgrounds, used as a pawn in his romance with a woman who could never truly understand what motherhood means." The host turned to the camera. "A heartbreaking situation. We reached out to Mr. Reed and Miss Ashford for comment, but neither responded to our requests. Coming up after the break," Marcus muted the television, rage and helplessness warring in his chest. Victoria had woken during the broadcast, her face pale as she processed Vanessa's calculated performance. "She's a goddamn artist." Her voice was hollow. Marcus stood, pacing the bedroom. "She abandoned Sophie. 3 years of not caring if she was sick or scared or needed her mother. And now she's on television crying about postpartum depression and second chances? The public loves a redemption arc, especially for mothers." Victoria reached for her phone, scrolling through social media. Twitter's exploding. Half the comments support her, half are calling her out for abandonment. But the narrative is shifting. She's not the villain anymore. She's the reformed sinner seeking forgiveness. Marcus wanted to put his fist through something. Instead, he forced himself to breathe, to think strategically the way Victoria had taught him. Catherine needs to counter this. We need our own narrative. Agreed. But Marcus... Victoria met his eyes, and he saw fear there for the first time. If we play this wrong, if we come across as vindictive or uncaring, we hand them ammunition. Judge Morrison is watching, Everything we do now becomes evidence. They spent the morning strategizing with Catherine, who'd already fielded calls from 3 different reporters requesting interviews. She advised against engaging directly, recommended they let the evidence speak instead of trading sound bites. Vanessa wants you to react emotionally. She wants you on camera angry or defensive, proving you're unstable. We stay focused on the facts. Her documented absence, your documented presence, Sophie's clear preference. We let the case build itself. But staying silent while Vanessa controlled the narrative felt like swallowing glass. That afternoon, Marcus picked Sophie up from kindergarten to find reporters waiting outside. Cameras flashed as he took her hand, microphones thrust forward with questions he refused to answer. "Mr. Reed, is it true you're dating your boss? Are you using your daughter to get closer to Victoria Ashford? What do you say to mothers who think Vanessa deserves a second chance?" He kept walking, shielding Sophie with his body, his heart hammering. She looked up at him, confused and frightened. "Daddy, why are those people yelling?" "They're just doing their job, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about." But she was worrying. He could see it in her face, the way she pressed closer to his leg, the tears gathering in her eyes. By the time they reached his car, Sophie was crying. "I want to go home. I want Miss Tori." Marcus buckled her in, his hands shaking with suppressed rage. Those reporters had terrified his daughter for a soundbite, had turned her ordinary school pickup into a traumatic spectacle. He called Victoria from the parking lot. "They ambushed us at Sophie's school." Her voice went deadly quiet. "Are you both okay?" "Physically, yes. But Sophie's scared. She doesn't understand why strangers are yelling questions." "I'm calling Catherine. This crosses a line. We'll get a restraining order against media harassment, limit their access." "Tori, this is what they want." Vanessa painted herself as the victim on television this morning, and now she's got the media doing her dirty work. If we react too strongly, we look paranoid and controlling. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't kissed you at that gala, if I'd been more careful about keeping our relationship private—" "Stop. I'm not sorry you kissed me. I'm not sorry we're together. I'm just sorry that loving you means Sophie gets hurt." More silence. Then, so quietly, he almost missed it. "I love you too." The words hung in the space between them, vulnerable and true. They'd been circling this admission for months, maybe from the moment Victoria had sat down beside Sophie 18 months ago and talked about unicorns instead of firing him for bringing a child to the office. "I know. I've known for a while." "Since when?" Marcus watched Sophie in the rearview mirror, her tears drying as she played with one of her toys. "Since you showed up at my apartment with soup. Since you told me about the baby you lost. Since you looked at me like I was worth something more than a paycheck. You are. You're worth everything." They stayed on the phone, breathing together across the distance, until Sophie asked if they could go home now, and Marcus had to return to the immediate crisis of protecting his daughter from a media circus neither of them had created. That evening, Victoria arrived with takeout and determination. They ate Chinese food on the floor while Sophie chattered about her day, carefully avoiding any mention of the reporters. After bedtime, they sat together on the couch, Victoria's head on Marcus's shoulder. "The board vote is scheduled for Friday, 3 days from now." Her voice was steady, but he felt her trembling. "What happens if you lose?" "I'm removed as CEO. I'll retain my shares and board seat, but operational control goes to someone else. Probably Thomas Hendricks. He's been positioning himself as my successor for years. And if you win? I keep my job, but lose their trust. Every decision gets questioned, every move scrutinized.
It'll be like walking through a minefield. Marcus shifted to face her. You could still back down. Tell them we're just friends, that the media exaggerated our relationship. Keep your company. Victoria's eyes flashed. And what would that make me? Someone who abandons people she loves when things get difficult? I spent 10 years being that person after my fiancé left. I won't go back. She kissed him, fierce and desperate. If I lose the vote, I lose the vote. But I'm not losing you. They made love that night with the urgency of people who understood their time might be running out, that forces beyond their control were working to tear them apart. Afterward, Victoria fell asleep in his arms, and Marcus stared at the ceiling, wondering if love was always this terrifying, this costly. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Catherine. Dr. Santos submitted his report. Judge Morrison has it now. No word on contents. Marcus closed his eyes, sending silent prayers to whatever deity might be listening. Let Sophie's words have been enough. Let the psychologist have seen what Marcus saw every day. A child who was loved, who felt safe, who needed her father more than she needed a mansion in the suburbs. Morning came too quickly. Victoria left early for emergency meetings, trying to shore up support before Friday's vote. Marcus took Sophie to school, carefully checking for reporters before getting out of the car. The coast was clear, and he walked her to her classroom with relief. Her teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, pulled him aside. Mr. Reed, I need you to know, if you need me to testify about Sophie's well-being, about your involvement in her education, I'm happy to do so. I've worked with hundreds of families over 15 years. You're one of the best parents I've ever seen. The unexpected support made Marcus's throat tight. Thank you. That means everything. She squeezed his arm.
Sophie talks about you constantly, about the science experiments you do together, the books you read, the way you explain difficult concepts in ways she can understand. And she talks about Miss Torrey, too, how she teaches her about inventions and takes her questions seriously. That child knows she's loved. Whatever the courts decide, you've given her an incredible foundation. Marcus carried those words with him through the rest of the day, armor against the doubt that kept creeping in. He threw himself into work, developing marketing campaigns and reviewing proposals, desperate for normalcy in a life that had become anything but normal. Amanda stopped by his office late afternoon. I shouldn't tell you this. Victoria would kill me if she knew. But the preliminary board vote count isn't looking good. She's got support from maybe 40%. Not enough. Marcus's stomach dropped. When did you hear this? This morning. Thomas Hendricks has been making calls, promising stability and business-first leadership. He's positioning Victoria's relationship with you as proof she's lost objectivity. Has she? Amanda's expression softened. Maybe, but I've never seen her happier. Before you, she was brilliant but hollow. All work, no life. You and Sophie gave her something to care about beyond quarterly earnings. If that's losing objectivity, maybe objectivity is overrated. She left him with that thought. Marcus tried calling Victoria, but her phone went straight to voicemail. She was probably in back-to-back meetings, fighting for her professional life while he sat uselessly in his office, wishing he could make this easier. His phone rang. Catherine. We got Dr. Santos's report. Marcus's heart stopped. And? It's good. Really good. Sophie told him you're the only parent she feels safe with,
that you know her favorite foods and her bad dreams and how to help when she's scared. She said Vanessa is pretty, but doesn't know her very well. She said Miss Tori teaches her about science and makes her daddy smile. Relief flooded through him so intensely he had to sit down. So it helps our case? Significantly. Dr. Santos recommended maintaining primary custody with you, with supervised visitation for Vanessa. It's not a guarantee. Judge Morrison makes her own decisions, but it's strong evidence in our favor. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt something like hope. He left work early, picking up Sophie and taking her to their favorite pizza place in Queens. They sat in a booth, and she told him about her day, a game at recess, a book Ms. Rodriguez read, a drawing she made that was currently taped to the classroom wall. Normal. Gloriously, beautifully normal. Daddy? Yes, sweetheart? Are you and Miss Tori going to get married? The question caught him off guard. He set down his pizza, searching for age-appropriate honesty. Would you like that? Sophie considered carefully. I think so. She's nice. And she makes you happy. And she knows about robots. Marcus laughed, despite the weight pressing on his chest. Those are all very good reasons. Plus, if she was your wife, she could be my bonus mom. Like having two moms, but one is the real one who doesn't visit much, and one is the one who actually likes me. The casual wisdom of children. Sophie had already worked out the emotional mathematics, had categorized Vanessa as the biological parent who failed to show up, and Victoria as the chosen parent who did. Miss Tori loves you very much. I know. She tells me all the time. Marcus's heart cracked open. Victoria had been telling Sophie she loved her, not as a boss to an employee's kid, but as someone who'd claimed this child in her heart regardless of biology or legal custody. They finished dinner and drove home through Queens traffic. Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from her day. Marcus carried her up the stairs, tucked her into bed, still fully dressed because he couldn't bear to wake her. Victoria called at 9. The board vote is definitely happening Friday. I'm going to lose. Her voice carried resignation instead of fight, and that scared him more than anything. Don't give up yet. I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. Thomas has the votes. I'll be out as CEO by end of week. Silence stretched between them. I'm sorry. Victoria's laugh was bitter. Don't be. I'm not. Losing my company hurts, but losing you and Sophie would destroy me. I'm choosing what matters. What will you do? Start over. I've been thinking about it all day. Maybe it's time for something new. A smaller company. More focus on innovation than management. More time for the things that actually bring joy. Maybe losing this battle means winning a different war. The resilience in her voice reminded him why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Victoria Ashford didn't stay down. She adapted, rebuilt, found new paths forward. I got good news today. Dr. Santos's report supports us keeping Sophie. He heard her breath catch. Really? Catherine says it's strong evidence. Not a guarantee, but strong. That's... Marcus. That's incredible. One battle at a time. We might lose yours on Friday, but we're not losing mine. They talked until midnight, making plans and sharing fears, building a future from the wreckage of the present. When they finally said goodnight, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Certainty that whatever happened, they'd face it together. Friday morning arrived with rain hammering against Manhattan windows, the sky dark as Marcus's mood. He sat in Victoria's penthouse, watching her dress for the board meeting that would determine her fate. She'd chosen a charcoal suit, armor for corporate warfare, and her hands were steady as she applied minimal makeup. "You don't have to be brave for me." She met his eyes in the mirror. "I'm not being brave. I'm being practical. If they vote me out, I'll still own 23% of the company. I'll start something new, something better. This isn't the end of the world." But her voice wavered on the last word, betraying the truth underneath. Ashford Technologies was her legacy, her proof that she mattered, the empire she'd built from grief and determination. Losing it would hurt, regardless of what came after. Marcus crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "I love you." Victoria leaned back against him, closing her eyes. "I love you too. Win or lose today, that doesn't change." She left at 8, heels clicking across marble floors, briefcase in hand, every inch the CEO who'd revolutionized her industry. Marcus watched from the window as her car disappeared into Manhattan traffic, then gathered his own things for the custody trial's evidentiary hearing scheduled for that afternoon. The timing was deliberate cruelty. Both their futures decided on the same day, by different judges in different buildings. The universe apparently determined to test how much pressure they could withstand. Catherine met him at the courthouse at noon, her expression grim. "Vanessa's team filed a last-minute motion, introducing evidence of your relationship with Victoria. They're arguing it demonstrates poor judgment, that you're prioritizing romance over stability, that Sophie's been exposed to an inappropriate adult relationship." Marcus felt rage building in his chest. "We're not inappropriate. We're in love. People fall in love." "I know, but they're going to paint it as reckless. Single father begins affair with female boss, gets caught up in billionaire drama, exposes child to media circus. They'll argue Sophie needs the calm, stable environment Vanessa can provide. Vanessa created the media circus by going on television." Catherine's expression said that logic wouldn't matter in court. The courtroom was smaller than Marcus expected, wood-paneled and formal, with Judge Morrison already seated when they entered. Vanessa sat with her legal team on one side, Marcus and Catherine on the other. Victoria's seat beside him remained empty. She was blocks away fighting her own battle. Judge Morrison surveyed them both over her reading glasses. "We're here for evidentiary hearing in the matter of Hartley Blackwood versus Reed. I've reviewed Dr. Santos's psychological evaluation, home study reports, and supplementary motions. Let's proceed efficiently. Mr. Stokes, call your first witness." Vanessa took the stand wearing a dove-gray dress that suggested maternal softness. She'd mastered the performance, voice trembling at appropriate moments, tears gathering when discussing her mistakes, conviction radiating when talking about redemption. "I was 24 when Sophie was born. Overwhelmed and terrified. I suffered from undiagnosed postpartum depression, though I didn't recognize it at the time. I thought running away was the answer, that Sophie would be better off without me." She dabbed at her eyes. "I was wrong. So terribly wrong. I've spent 3 years working with therapists, addressing my mental health, building the stable life Sophie deserves. I'm not asking to erase Marcus from her life. He's been a devoted father. I'm asking to be part of that life too, to give my daughter the complete family she's missing." Richard Stokes guided her through carefully rehearsed answers about her marriage to Robert, their home in Connecticut with dedicated space for Sophie, the opportunities she could provide. Vanessa painted herself as the penitent sinner seeking forgiveness, the reformed mother ready to step up. Catherine's cross-examination was surgical. "Mrs. Blackwood, you mentioned postpartum depression. When were you formally diagnosed?" Vanessa hesitated. I wasn't formally diagnosed at the time, but my current therapist believes. So there's no medical documentation of postpartum depression from when Sophie was actually born? It went undiagnosed, as I said. You visited Sophie 7 times in 3 years, is that correct? I was working on myself, getting healthy, 7 times, 31 total hours. Is that correct? Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. Yes. During those visits, how many of Sophie's favorite foods did you learn? Her preferred books? Her fears or dreams? We spent quality time together. Catherine produced photos from Vanessa's Instagram. These photos show you and Sophie at FAO Schwartz. How long was that visit? About an hour. And after purchasing an expensive toy and taking photos for social media, you left Sophie with her father and went where? Vanessa's lawyer objected, but Judge Morrison allowed the question. I had a prior commitment, a spa weekend. A spa weekend seemed more important than spending additional time with the daughter you claimed to miss desperately. The courtroom fell silent. Vanessa's face flushed crimson, her carefully constructed narrative fracturing under scrutiny. Catherine pressed forward. You recently married Robert Blackwood. How many conversations has he had with Sophie? Robert is still getting to know her. How many, Mrs. Blackwood? Perhaps 5 or 6. Sophie's shy around new people. Catherine pulled out a document, the email Vanessa's team had unsuccessfully tried to suppress. Is Mr. Blackwood shy around Sophie? Or does he consider her, quote, not his problem? Richard Stokes shot to his feet. Objection! That email was taken out of context. Judge Morrison silenced him with one raised hand. I'll allow it. Mrs. Blackwood, did your husband write those words? Vanessa's voice dropped to barely audible. Yes. So the stable 2-parent household you're offering includes a stepfather who views Sophie as a problem rather than a child to be loved. No response. Vanessa stared at her hands, the performance thoroughly demolished. Catherine returned to her seat, and Marcus felt the first flutter of hope. But the battle wasn't over. Robert took the stand next, attempting to salvage the situation with talk of financial resources and educational opportunities. Catherine destroyed him just as efficiently, exposing his indifference toward Sophie, his political motivations for wanting custody. Then came Marcus's turn. He walked to the witness stand on shaking legs, placing his hand on the Bible, swearing to tell the truth. Catherine's questions were gentle, allowing him to tell his story. 3 years of solo parenting, of building a life where Sophie felt safe and loved despite their modest means. Describe a typical evening with Sophie. Marcus's voice steadied as he spoke about their routine. Homework at the kitchen table. Dinner he'd cooked while she told him about her day. Bath time and bedtime stories. The science experiments they conducted on weekends. Simple moments that added up to a childhood. Does Sophie know she's loved? Every single day. She knows because I tell her, because I show her, because being her father is the most important thing I've ever done. Richard Stokes's cross-examination aimed for blood. Mr. Reed, you began a romantic relationship with your direct supervisor, Victoria Ashford, while still employed by her company. Isn't that true? Our relationship developed organically over 18 months. Please answer yes or no. You're romantically involved with your boss. Yes. A boss who's currently embroiled in corporate scandal, facing removal from her own company. Catherine objected, but the damage was done. Miss Ashford's business challenges are separate from, but they've affected Sophie, haven't they? Media attention, reporters at her school, strangers asking invasive questions. Marcus's hands clenched. That media attention was created by Mrs. Blackwood's television appearances, not by our relationship. Isn't it true that Miss Ashford is using company resources to fund your custody battle? That's not. She hired Catherine Walsh, one of the most expensive family attorneys in New York. How are you affording her fees, Mr. Reed? The implication hung poisonous in the air. Marcus forced himself to stay calm. Ms. Walsh's fees are her business, not yours. But for the record, she's being compensated fairly for her work. Stokes smirked, moving on to attack Marcus's work hours, his modest apartment, the times Sophie had been at Ashford Technologies instead of daycare. Each question designed to paint him as irresponsible, distracted, more focused on romance than parenting. By the time Catherine's redirect came, Marcus felt flayed open. Mr. Reed, why did you allow Sophie to occasionally come to your workplace? Because my boss, Victoria, understood that being a good father sometimes meant flexibility. She created a safe space where Sophie could do homework or read while I finished urgent projects. It was never about neglect. It was about making parenthood and career coexist. And your relationship with Ms. Ashford, has it harmed Sophie in any way? Marcus met Judge Morrison's eyes directly. No. Victoria loves Sophie. She teaches her science, encourages her curiosity, treats her with respect. Sophie's life is richer because Victoria is in it. I won't apologize for loving someone who makes both of us better. Catherine smiled slightly. No further questions. The courtroom broke for lunch. Marcus stumbled outside, desperate for air, and found a text from Victoria. Vote happening now. We'll call soon. He couldn't eat. Catherine tried forcing coffee in a sandwich, but his stomach rejected everything. They returned to court for closing arguments, both lawyers delivering impassioned speeches about what Sophie deserved. Finally, Judge Morrison spoke. I'll be candid with both parties. This case troubles me. Mrs. Blackwood, your absence from Sophie's life for 3 years cannot be excused by undiagnosed depression you only claim retroactively. Your sudden interest, coinciding with your ex-husband's new relationship, raises serious questions about motivation. Vanessa's face went pale. However, Mr. Reed, your relationship with Miss Ashford complicates matters. The media attention has affected Sophie, regardless of who initiated it. The court must consider whether that attention serves her best interests. Marcus's heart hammered. I've reviewed Dr. Santos's report carefully. Sophie is unequivocal in her attachment to her father and her trust in Miss Ashford. She views her mother as a peripheral figure, someone pretty who occasionally visits but doesn't truly know her. That testimony is damning, Mrs. Blackwood. Judge Morrison removed her glasses, meeting Vanessa's eyes. Children aren't possessions to be reclaimed when convenient. They're human beings, deserving consistency and love. You voluntarily relinquished custody. You chose to be absent. Those choices have consequences. She turned to Marcus. Mr. Reed has demonstrated exemplary parenting despite difficult circumstances. The home study confirms Sophie's environment is loving, stable, and nurturing. Her academic performance is excellent. Her social development age-appropriate. Her emotional well-being strong. Relief began flooding through Marcus's chest. Therefore, this court denies the petition for modification of custody. Primary physical and legal custody remains with Marcus Reed. Mrs. Blackwood's visitation will continue supervised until she completes court-ordered therapy and demonstrates consistent, appropriate engagement with her daughter over a minimum 6-month period. The gavel fell. Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't process. Catherine was gripping his arm, her face split in a triumphant smile. Across the courtroom, Vanessa had collapsed into tears, Richard Stokes already gathering papers with the efficiency of someone planning an appeal. He'd won. Sophie was staying with him. His phone rang. Victoria. He answered with shaking hands. "Marcus?" Her voice was thick with tears. "We won. The judge ruled in our favor. Sophie stays with me." A sob broke through the line. "Thank God. Thank God." "What about you? The vote?" Silence stretched. Then quietly, "I lost. Thomas Hendricks is the new CEO. Effective Monday." The victory and defeat collided in Marcus's chest, joy and grief tangling together. "Tori, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. I'm not." "You and Sophie are safe. That's all that matters." But he heard the pain underneath, the loss she was trying to minimize for his sake. "Where are you?" "Still at the office, packing my things." "I'm coming to you." He left the courthouse, Catherine promising to handle the remaining paperwork. The subway ride to Ashford Technologies felt interminable, Marcus's emotions whipsawing between relief and anguish. He'd gotten everything he wanted, and Victoria had lost everything she'd built. The executive floor was quiet when he arrived, most employees having cleared out after the dramatic board meeting. Victoria's office door stood open, boxes scattered across her desk. She stood at the window overlooking Manhattan, her back to him. "Tori." She turned, and he saw the devastation she'd been hiding on the phone. Tears streaked her makeup, her carefully constructed armor finally crumbling. Marcus crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. She collapsed against him, sobbing with the grief of losing her company, her identity, the empire that had defined her for a decade. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Stop apologizing," she managed between sobs. "I made my choice. I'd make it again." They stood together while Manhattan glittered below. Victory and defeat wound so tightly together, neither could celebrate or mourn separately. Eventually, Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Tell me about the trial. Everything." Marcus recounted Judge Morrison's ruling, Vanessa's devastation, the certainty that Sophie was his to keep. Victoria's face transformed as he spoke, genuine joy breaking through her grief. "She's yours. Our girl is safe." The possessive pronoun, "our girl," made Marcus's throat tighten. "Thanks to you, your lawyers, your support, your refusal to back down." Victoria cupped his face. "I didn't do this for gratitude. I did it because you and Sophie are my family. The only family that's ever felt real." They kissed, salt and relief, and promises neither of them had words for yet. Amanda appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but security needs your credentials and building access card." The corporate cruelty of it. Victoria had just lost her company, and already they were stripping her access like she was a security risk. She handed over her ID badge without comment, the plastic rectangle that had represented her identity for 10 years, suddenly meaningless. "Thank you for everything, Amanda. You've been incredible." Amanda hugged her, fierce and brief. "This isn't over. The board made a mistake. You built this place. They'll regret forcing you out." After Amanda left, Victoria resumed packing. Marcus helped, folding away years of achievement into cardboard boxes, patents and awards, photos from product launches, the small personal items that had made this sterile office slightly human. At the bottom of a drawer, Victoria found a photo he'd never seen before. A younger version of herself, maybe 28, visibly pregnant, laughing beside a tall man with dark hair. My fiancé. Taken 3 weeks before the miscarriage. Marcus studied the image. Victoria looked radiant, her hand resting protectively over her belly, her expression filled with hope. You look happy. I was. I thought I had everything figured out. The business, the baby, the perfect future. Then it all fell apart, and I spent 10 years trying to prove losing it didn't destroy me. She set the photo aside, not packing it. I don't need that version of myself anymore. She was chasing the wrong dreams. They finished packing as evening fell. Victoria took one last look around the office that had been her second home, then walked out without looking back. In the lobby, former employees watched her go, some with sympathy, others with the relieved expressions of people who'd survived a purge. Outside, rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glittering. Victoria turned to Marcus on the sidewalk. I need to tell Sophie. About losing my job, about what's changing. She'll understand. She's resilient. I hope so. I don't want her thinking this is her fault. They picked Sophie up from Mrs. Kowalski's apartment together. The elderly woman had heard the news. Both victories and defeats traveled fast in their Queens neighborhood and pulled Victoria into a surprising hug. You did good, helping our Marcus. That takes real strength. Sophie rushed into Marcus's arms, chattering about her day, oblivious to the emotional earthquake that had reshaped their lives. They brought her home, ordered pizza, and settled on the living room floor for what Marcus had started calling their Friday night tradition. After dinner, Victoria took Sophie's small hands in hers. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something. I won't be working at Ashford Technologies anymore. Sophie's eyes went wide. Why not? Did you get fired? Sort of. The people I work with decided they wanted someone else to be in charge. That's dumb. You're the best. Victoria laughed through sudden tears. Thank you, honey. But sometimes grown-ups make changes, even when it's hard. The important thing is, I'll have more time now. More time for us. Sophie considered this carefully. So you can come to my school play next month? Daddy said you might be too busy. I will absolutely be at your school play. Front row. Sophie threw her arms around Victoria's neck. Good, because you're my bonus mom, and bonus moms should see school plays. Marcus watched them embrace, his heart too full for words. They'd lost and won, survived and endured, and somehow come out the other side still whole. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Victoria and Marcus sat on his small balcony overlooking Queens. The boroughs stretched out before them, lights twinkling in windows where other families lived their ordinary lives. What happens now? Victoria leaned against him. I have meetings with investors next week. 3 different venture capital firms interested in whatever I start next. I'm thinking something smaller, more focused on innovation than scale, something that leaves room for family. She turned to face him. I want to do this right, Marcus. Not move too fast, not rush Sophie into something she's not ready for. But I want a future with you both. Do you want that too? Marcus kissed her softly. I've wanted that since you sat down with Sophie and talked about unicorns. I was just too scared to hope for it. Don't be scared anymore. We survived the worst they could throw at us. Everything from here is just building what comes next.
3 months later, fall arrived in New York with sharp air and changing leaves. Marcus stood in Victoria's new office, not a 40-story tower, but a converted warehouse in Brooklyn with exposed brick and natural light. Ashford Innovations, the sign read, smaller than her previous empire, but wholly hers. She'd raised funding in record time, hired a team of brilliant engineers, and was already developing patents that had her former board members quietly regretting their vote. Thomas Hendricks was running Ashford Technologies into the ground through conservative decisions and risk-averse strategies, while Victoria was building something revolutionary. Sophie burst into the office after school, her backpack bouncing. "Miss Tori, guess what? My volcano won the science fair." Victoria swept her up, spinning her around. "I knew it would. Your hypothesis was brilliant." Marcus watched them together, his heart swelling. In 3 months, they'd built routines and rhythms, family dinners and weekend experiments, bedtime stories where Victoria took turns with him. Sophie called her Tori Mom now, the distinction clear in her 5-year-old logic. Vanessa was Mom, the biological connection who visited supervised twice monthly, and Victoria was Tori Mom, the chosen parent who showed up daily. Vanessa had completed 6 months of therapy and now saw Sophie unsupervised for 4 hours every other Saturday. The visits were stilted, awkward, Vanessa trying too hard while Sophie remained politely distant. But Marcus encouraged the relationship, hoping someday his daughter might have both mothers in her life meaningfully. Robert was gone, arrested for securities fraud, his real estate empire crumbling under FBI investigation. Vanessa had filed for divorce and moved into a modest apartment in Brooklyn, working as a receptionist while rebuilding her life. She'd stopped the Instagram campaign, stopped the television interviews, started showing up consistently even when it wasn't convenient. Progress, Catherine called it. Marcus called it too little too late, but he kept that opinion to himself. Victoria's phone rang, an investor wanting to discuss Series A funding. She took the call while Sophie showed Marcus her science fair ribbon, pride radiating from every pore. That evening, Victoria came to their apartment for dinner. She'd been staying over most nights, her toothbrush beside his in the bathroom, her clothes migrating into his closet. They hadn't discussed moving in together officially, but it was happening organically, naturally, like everything between them. After Sophie went to bed, Marcus found Victoria on the balcony again, staring out at Queens. "What are you thinking about?" She turned, moonlight catching her features. How different everything could have been. If I'd backed down when the board pressured me, if I'd chosen the company over you.
Do you regret it?
Not even a little. Ashford Technologies made me successful. You and Sophie made me happy. There's no comparison. Marcus pulled a small box from his pocket. He'd been carrying it for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Maybe there was no right moment. Maybe you just chose one and made it right through the choosing. "I have something for you." Victoria's eyes widened as he opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band with a single diamond. "I know we should probably wait longer, be more cautious, let Sophie adjust more, but I've spent 3 years being cautious and careful, and it hasn't made me any happier. You have." He took her hand. "Marry me. Not because it makes sense or looks good or fits someone's timeline. Marry me because we built something real from broken pieces, because you chose us when it cost you everything, because I can't imagine any future that doesn't have you in it." Tears streamed down Victoria's face. "Yes, God, yes." He slipped the ring on her finger,
A perfect fit, like she'd been made to wear it. They kissed under the Queen's night sky while the city breathed around them, indifferent to their small triumph. "We should tell Sophie." Victoria laughed through tears. "She's going to say she knew it was coming. She told me last week that you were acting weird and probably planning something." "She's too smart for her own good." "She gets it from her father." They went inside together, and Marcus gently woke Sophie. She blinked sleepily at them. "What's wrong?" Victoria held out her hand, showing the ring. "Your daddy asked me to marry him. I said yes. Is that okay with you?" Sophie's face split into a grin. "Finally! I've been waiting forever!" She threw her arms around both of them, and they held her between them, this child who'd brought them together, who'd given them both purpose beyond professional achievement. "Does this mean Tori Mom gets to live here all the time?" Marcus and Victoria exchanged glances. "Would you like that?" "Duh! She's already here all the time anyway. She might as well have her own room instead of sleeping in yours." The practicality of 5-year-old logic. They laughed, and Sophie joined in, and for a moment, everything was perfect and uncomplicated. The wedding happened 6 months later, small and intimate in Central Park. Sophie served as flower girl, wearing a junior scientist lab coat over her dress because she'd insisted that's what made her feel most herself. Mrs. Kowalski sat in the front row, dabbing at tears. Catherine attended with her husband, beaming with professional satisfaction. Vanessa had been invited, and, to everyone's surprise, she came. She sat in the back, wearing simple clothes, her expression sad but genuine. After the ceremony, she approached Marcus and Victoria. "Congratulations. You're both... Sophie's lucky to have you." Victoria extended her hand, a peace offering. "Thank you for coming. It means a lot." Vanessa shook it, then turned to Marcus. "I was wrong about you. About everything. You're a better parent than I could have been, and Victoria is... she's what Sophie needs. What you need." The admission cost her something. Marcus saw it in her face, the grief of knowing she'd lost her daughter through her own choices, that someone else was filling the role she'd abandoned. Sophie still needs her mother. The real you, not the performance. If you keep showing up, keep being consistent, there's room for you in her life. Vanessa nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. She slipped away quietly, and Marcus watched her go with something approaching forgiveness. The reception was held in Victoria's warehouse office, transformed with flowers and string lights. Sophie danced with abandon, pulling both her parents onto the makeshift dance floor. They swayed together, Marcus, Victoria, and the child who'd made them a family, while friends and colleagues celebrated around them. Late in the evening, Victoria pulled Marcus aside. "I have something for you. A wedding gift." She handed him a folder. Inside were legal documents, adoption papers already partially filled out. "I want to formally adopt Sophie. Make it legal, not just emotional. If that's something you're comfortable with." Marcus's vision blurred. "She already calls you Tori Mom." "I know, but I want it to be official. I want her to know she's mine, not just through marriage, but through choice and commitment and legal recognition." "Yes, absolutely yes." They filed the adoption papers the following week. The process took 3 months, background checks and home studies and court appearances. Sophie testified before a different judge, explaining earnestly that she wanted Tori Mom to be her real mom too, that having 2 moms was better than having just one who didn't visit much.
The judge approved the petition without hesitation.
On the day the adoption became official, they celebrated with chocolate cake and champagne. Grape juice for Sophie. She'd requested a certificate she could hang in her room, proof that her family was real and permanent. Victoria framed it herself, hanging it beside Sophie's science fair ribbons and school photos. Looking at it made her cry every single time, grateful tears for the family she'd thought she'd lost forever. 5 years after the adoption, Sophie was 10 years old and building actual robots in their home laboratory. Victoria's company had grown to 200 employees, valued at $500 million. Marcus had been promoted to Chief Marketing Officer, his strategies driving growth while maintaining the work-life balance Victoria insisted upon. They'd bought a house in Brooklyn with space for Sophie's experiments and Victoria's workshop. The walls were covered with Sophie's drawings and science awards, the kitchen table perpetually cluttered with homework and project materials. Vanessa visited monthly now, unsupervised. She'd rebuilt her life slowly, remarried to a kind accountant who treated Sophie with genuine warmth. The relationship between mother and daughter remained somewhat distant. Sophie was polite, affectionate in a reserved way, but her real emotional connection was with Marcus and Victoria. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. One evening, Marcus found Victoria in their bedroom, holding a sonogram image. "I went to the doctor today, for that checkup I'd been putting off." His heart stopped. "And?" She turned, tears streaming down her face. "I'm pregnant. 12 weeks. They're monitoring carefully because of the previous miscarriage, but so far, everything looks healthy." Marcus couldn't breathe, couldn't process the enormity of what she was saying. "We're having a baby?" "We're having a baby." He pulled her close, feeling her heart racing against his chest. They'd never discussed having children together, both assuming Victoria's medical history made it impossible. But apparently the universe had other plans. Sophie knocked on the door. "Can I come in? You guys are being weird." They let her enter, and Victoria showed her the sonogram. "You're going to be a big sister." Sophie's eyes went huge. "Really? Like a real baby?" "A real baby. Due in 6 months." Sophie examined the blurry image seriously. "Can we teach the baby about science? And robots?" Victoria laughed through tears. "Absolutely." "Cool. I'm going to be the best big sister ever." She hugged them both, already making plans for the baby's education, and Marcus felt his heart expand to accommodate more love than he'd thought possible. 6 months later, Victoria gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Owen Reed Ashford, and he had Marcus's eyes and Victoria's stubborn determination. Sophie was, as promised, the best big sister imaginable, reading to Owen and explaining complex scientific concepts he couldn't possibly understand. Marcus stood in the hospital room, watching his family, his wife holding their newborn son, his daughter curled beside them on the bed, all of them together and whole, and remembered the night Vanessa had told him he'd never amount to anything as a single father. She'd been wrong about everything. He hadn't just survived single fatherhood. He'd thrived. He built a family from spare parts and determination, from love and stubbornness, and refusing to accept that modest circumstances meant limited possibilities. Victoria looked up at him, her expression radiant despite exhaustion. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus crossed to them, kissing her forehead, then Sophie's, then Owen's. "I'm thinking about how Vanessa once told me I'd never find success trying to balance fatherhood and ambition. About how wrong she was." Victoria shifted Owen carefully, making room for Marcus on the bed. Success isn't measured in bank accounts or job titles. It's measured in moments like this, in the family you've built, the children who feel loved, the partner who chose you despite everything. Sophie looked up from where she was studying her baby brother. Also in science fair ribbons. Those are important too. They laughed, the four of them crowded onto a hospital bed, building the future one small moment at a time. Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them here, the divorce and custody battle, the media circus and corporate warfare, the nights spent terrified they'd lose everything that mattered. They'd survived it all through sheer determination and the absolute refusal to give up on each other. Vanessa had been right about one thing. Balancing fatherhood and ambition was difficult, but she'd missed the crucial piece. You didn't balance them alone. You found someone who valued both, who understood that being a present parent and a successful professional weren't mutually exclusive. You built a team, a family, a partnership that made the impossible feel routine. Looking at Victoria holding their son while Sophie dozed against her shoulder, Marcus understood what he'd been searching for his entire life. Not success or validation or proof of worth. Just this. The ordinary magic of people who chose each other daily, who built something beautiful from broken pieces, who refused to let the world tell them what family should look like. They'd won their battles not through money or lawyers or corporate power, but through love and consistency and showing up even when it was hard. Through choosing each other over and over. Through building a foundation strong enough to weather any storm. Victoria met his eyes over their children's heads. I love you. I love you too. All of you. Sophie mumbled sleepily. We know, Dad. You tell us like every day. And I'll keep telling you for the rest of your lives. Outside the hospital window, New York City glittered against the night sky, indifferent and eternal. But inside this room, something more precious than empires had been created. A family. Imperfect and complicated and absolutely real. Marcus had started this journey alone, a single father in a modest Queens apartment, terrified he'd never be enough. He'd ended it surrounded by more love than he'd ever imagined possible, with a wife who'd chosen him over her company, a daughter who knew she was cherished, and a son who'd grow up never doubting his place in the world. That was success. That was everything.